For some completely unfathomable reason, people seem to think that I do a lot of drugs.
I think it's time to discuss your philosophy of drug use as it relates to artistic endeavor.
And before we launch into the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and most importantly, share this video, because I don't seem to get picked up by the sharing algorithms, the recommendations and so on too much. And I have a Patreon, details are at the end of the video or down below. And if you want an early preview of my next RPG, Actual Fucking Monsters, then sub to the Patreon, because patrons are going to get early access to that. Postmortem Studios, role-playing games, and a lot more to die for. post-mort.com. So, drugs then. People do tend to think or to express the idea that I perhaps partake more than I actually do. This is often used as a way to dismiss anything that I might have to say. Maybe it's because I dress like an evil space wizard, but some people do genuinely seem to believe that I do lots of drugs, and they're not particularly judgmental about it. After all, lots of people do. But the fact of the matter is that I don't. I've always been a good boy. I've never really done a lot of drugs other than a bit of experimentation here and there. Weed. Never wanted to smoke it. Very good friend of mine made some cakes, some chocolate cake with a lot of hash in it so that I could try it and experiment with it. But my experience was that of being profoundly bored and frustrated because I wanted to do other things, and hungry yet nauseous. So that wasn't a particularly pleasant experiment. It was a lot stronger than they were intending it to be, but I didn't enjoy that. I've never really gone back to pot in any way. I do like the smell when people are burning in or smoking, but that's about the extent of it. My experience was not good. I think Henry Rollins described the sensation of being high on pot like being bored waiting for a bus, and I would tend to concur with him on that. Psychedelics, those are the closest thing to a drug that I've enjoyed, I suppose, and of course because I quite enjoyed being on mushrooms. I experimented once with LSD and didn't like it very much, but mushrooms were fantastic. Of course, I got into them just as they cracked down the law on them, because it used to be legal to have and to grow psilocybin mushrooms. It wasn't legal to have them prepared, have them dried, ready to take. Tastes like a mouthful of grass clippings, but the experience of being high on mushrooms was a very happy and good one. Unfortunately, while both incredibly high on shrooms, me and a good friend of mine had to make our way all the way across Basingstoke, which is not the happiest and most inspiring of landscapes, to get home late at night while high on shrooms. And we kept getting distracted by things like the glint of light off a discarded cigarette packet in a field, and we came upon the theory that the reason police cars have flashing lights on them is to catch people who are on psychedelics, because the lights were just fascinating, and you can just imagine all kinds of hippies emerging from the sides of the road like moths drawn to the flashing lights. It was very much the experience that we had with that. And then my other friend's belly button turned into a black hole and tried to swallow us all, which wasn't very nice, and then I had visions of Aztec gods until the sun came up. So that was fun. People ascribe all kinds of spiritual experiences to being on hallucinogenics. I'm far too cynical for that, because I know that they're hallucinations, and that's the end of it. I'd like to try DMT, see if I can catch myself a machine elf, but that's not exactly easy to get hold of. So yeah, hallucinogenics, they're okay. Speed, tried once, didn't have too much of an effect on me. Haven't wanted to try cocaine because it's turned people into assholes. Haven't wanted to try ecstasy because I've been around people who are on ecstasy, and my god, do they ever shut up. Ever. and getting hugged by total random strangers in a club that plays music that I don't like and that you can apparently only appreciate when you are on ecstasy, not fun. And the down after being on MDMA is pretty harsh, going by other friends' experiences. So that wasn't for me. Now, I did a video a short time ago on called Limited about the prescription drugs that I'm on. These various forms of psychiatric medication. I've been on all kinds of different ones, primarily antidepressants. I've also been on antipsychotics off-label. I'm not psychotic. It's just that they can have a good effect for some people who suffer from depression, and go some way towards silencing that kind of nagging voice that a lot of depressives have that really just kind of shits on them all the time, tells you that you're rubbish, that you're no good at anything, that nothing you're trying to do is any good. So yeah, they were kind of good for that, but kind of stopped working. They might want to put me back on them. Now, I have weird brain chemistry, apparently, and this may be why recreational drugs haven't particularly been my bag. Even on these prescription medications, which, are pure and controlled, and the effects and side effects are all well known, I tend to get the weirdest, freakiest, least likely side effects from them, and the effects of them can be quite unpredictable. And this is my 5th or 6th antidepressant combination cocktail of drugs, just trying to find something that works for me. So that's another reason that I've steered away from recreational drugs. And also why I hadn't, until relatively recently, gotten into nootropics. Now, nootropics are drugs that are supposed to make you cognitively more capable. So I did the video called Limited, which was kind of like a spoof of Limitless. And the idea of Limitless is that there was this drug that you could take that would activate your entire brain. That's pseudoscience. You use all of your brain, you just don't use it all at the same time. But the idea of a smart drug, or of a compound that can make you more intelligent, more capable, that can allow you to make the cross connections in your brain that already exist but which you have trouble retrieving, that idea is a powerful one, and an interesting one, and an appealing one. And I think that's why nootropics get so much attention from the kind of biohacking community, from computer hackers, from makers, from creative people. The idea of having something in a bottle that you can take that will make you your best version of yourself mentally, that's really appealing. So I decided to experiment a bit, and I have to tell you that just about anything that you can get commercially, it is not a nootropic. Maybe you'll get a caffeine high or a similar kind of impetus and feel a little bit more awake from whatever mixture of things they've got in them. Some of them will perhaps replenish micronutrients and things that you use when you're thinking really hard, but none of them, at least in my experience, my subjective experience, have any other real and genuine effect. There is only one drug, and it's one that's medical, that actually has anything like a nootropic effect, and even that is contested, and that's Modafinil. Now, a lot of people call this the real Limitless drug. A lot of kids take it during their university exams and so on, to give them focus, to keep them awake while they study or finish their papers or whatever. For all that it's contested about what it is, what it does, and so on, it is recommended by several militaries as a replacement for amphetamines to keep soldiers up and active, and so on. If you look into history, a big part of the reason that Britain won the Battle of Britain, the aerial battle over southern England, was because we had superior amphetamines to the Nazis. So there's something to be said for that. The military recognises the usefulness of certain compounds, and Modafinil and its derivatives is now what's recommended by the militaries. Now, I was prescribed a short course of Modafinil to try and counteract some of the other side effects of my other drugs, though it was discontinued. Apparently they should never have prescribed it to me in the first place. So I thought I'd relate what my experience of it is. Now, keeping in mind, as I've said, my brain chemistry is odd. Everyone has different reactions. If you're on other forms of medication, interactions between those can be peculiar. So in no way take this as a recommendation of any kind. I'm just going to kind of lay out my experience. So in my experience, modafinil doesn't make you better. It doesn't create those cross connections. You know, people call it the real life limitless, but it's not really. What it does do is that it makes you awake, properly awake, not like a caffeine rush, got sort of panic attack sort of awake. It just makes you really alert and really focused, and lets you fixate on a project, or in my case, my writing and so on. And kind of, it's an artificial way of kind of being in the zone. Creativity is its own thing, but the zone where you're really productive. So the antidepressants that I'm on make me very tired, make it hard to concentrate and so on. And while I was on this short course of modafinil, I had so much focus and was able to do so much more. So without it, I was struggling to do 500 to 1,000 words of usable text a day. Keeping in mind, I used to do between 2 and 10,000 every day before I got diagnosed with depression. On the modafinil, I was doing 2 to 5,000 words a day, more like the old me, and that's really my experience of it. I felt awake, I felt focused, I felt capable while I was under the influence of this drug. Now, it's psychologically addictive, so again, I would warn people off it. It's a prescription drug, and there's kind of a grey market in sales of it, because students and so on. It's mostly used to treat narcolepsy and sleep apnea. And if you don't have one of those conditions, you can't really get it, but there's this whole grey market that's blown up around it, because it's technically legal for the right reasons, but you have to have a prescription and all the rest of it. So I was legitimately on it for a short time. There are illegitimate means to get it. I'm not going to tell you what those are. I'm probably demonetized anyway for talking about drugs, but go with recommendations if you want to experiment on this, and I wouldn't recommend that you do without fully thinking it through. But I know you're all autonomous individuals responsible for your own choices. I can see how it would be psychologically addictive, because that feeling of being in the zone, of being capable of being awake, feeling normal in my case, because it was counteracting the effects of all these other drugs that I have to take to stop me from doing myself a mischief. Yeah, just that feeling of being normal and awake and alert was very powerful and very tempting. There aren't any major side effects most of the time, and I tend to get the worst side effects. I didn't feel much in the way of side effects. It doesn't have a down in the same way that amphetamines or MDMA or anything do, but in forcing yourself to be awake, obviously the tiredness still builds up in the background, and then when you come down from the drug, that can hit you. So I'd be concerned about that to an extent. One thing I found that it was really good for was kind of resetting my body clock. I have a tendency to be a night owl, so I will stay up really, really late and sleep during the day, and if I don't have alarms, if I don't have a regular routine and so on, that's how things gradually creep, even over a long weekend. And what modafinil was really good for me was kind of resetting my body clock. So Monday morning, get up at the same time I have to every day after my body clock had shifted, take that, stay awake right the way through the day, do a full day's work and everything, and then as it wore off, flump, fall asleep properly, get a good night's sleep, reset my body clock. So yeah, it's the effect of that is real. That's not fake, but it's only somewhat legal. unless you have a genuine medical condition. And I would worry about the psychological addiction. Other than psychedelics, though, that's the only positive, truly positive drug experience I can say that I've had. Other than maybe alcohol, but that's a whole other set of stories. Zang.
It's time for you boys to share my last taste of the true black meat. Flesh of the giant aquatic Brazilian centipede.